I'm going to fix it right around here. Right around here.
Yeah, right around here would be good.
Okay. Dude, that she
never looked so good. Wow.
She's never.
I have done a couple of shots for videos that we have done, and we have to deal with people that are bald, so that's the hardest one.
Oh, the bald? Oh.
Yeah.
Well, if you were doing the back of the show would be on the back, it would be a bald show. Yeah.
Christine is not here. She is feeling under the weather and somehow roped her husband, John, into filling in for her today. Thank you so much, John, for joining the show.
Kendra, it's good to be here. Good to see you. Sorry, viewers, you get to look at me today.
Which is fine. He's not sore on the eyes, people. I'm forewarning you, those listeners, if you want to watch it on YouTube, which I think will be great. And I have to be honest, when Christine called me a few hours ago, she said, hey, I'm just not feeling up for it. But good news, my husband said he would fill in for me. And I thought, wow, how weird is that going to be? Because of the topic that we're going to discuss today, which is super sensitive. And I'll be real honest with you. I haven't really talked to many people, many women about this, let alone men. I'll share that a little bit. But our topic is going to be about abortion. I will not put you in the hot seat yet, but you're going
I'm ready. I'm ready.
I know. I'm going to try and absorb some of the heat for you and speak. I wanted to talk a little bit about my journey with abortion, the teachings of the Catholic Church, and how many years I did not believe in the teachings. And so I'll start off with, I was raised by the culture. A lot of people know my story, but bottom line is I believed when it came to abortion that it was a woman's right. It was a woman's body, and she should be able to choose what she does with her body. I never gave it much thought until I was in high school, which was when I lost my virginity. And there were a couple of times where I thought I was pregnant. And I remember thinking, oh, the horror. And what would I tell my parents if I was pregnant? How embarrassed would I be with all my friends looking at me, gawking at me? You know, like, I am going to be very honest with the world right now and say, if I was pregnant in high school or even college, 99.9% would probably choose to have an abortion back in those days of mine, right? And one of the last teachings that I came to accept was abortion. And I almost found myself caring about animals more than I did about human beings. I mean, I was like a big donator to ASPCA, and I'm not saying that animals are not beautiful, and I love them, my dogs, and had to put a few down. I know how we have wonderful pets in our lives. But I remember my father-in-law actually saying, you know, you're donating all this money to these pet shelters. What about the starving children and people in this world, you know? And I thought, well, they could take care of themselves. They have like minds. And it was so wrong the way that I thought of human life and the sanctity thereof. I just didn't think much of it. I didn't see a baby. I never saw any of the films or an ultrasound or anything like that. And I'll be honest, I never really even talked to anybody about it, even when I started accepting the fact that, okay, I get the sanctity of life. I remember Saint Teresa, Saint Mother Teresa, said that if it, you know, what if we aborted Jesus? What if Mary had an abortion? Jesus was a little embryo in the womb and he was God, you know? So I do believe that there is something happening here with God and why you're here, because I can't wait. I think it's phenomenal to have a man talk about this as well. I think it's better than Christine. Don't tell her I said that.
Oh, of course. I won't tell her.
All right. So I've never talked to women about this, and I have a lot of friends who were very upset and I know regret their decisions. I need to say that this is by no means, I'm going to look in the camera here, this is no means judgment on anyone. I've had many mortal sins in my life. I've conducted them all, I'm telling you, and confession's where it's at. And let's just go there. I don't have any children. This woman has never birthed a child because I was on birth control forever. I mean, it seems like almost 20 plus years. And then, of course, that was one of the second hardest lessons that I had to learn in the Catholic Church about the mortal sin of birth control. I regret not having kids. And I know that there are a lot of women out there who might regret having an abortion. And I can't put myself in that position. All I know is if you are Catholic and you can go to confession, God's mercy is incredible. I've experienced it firsthand, and it'll help you heal. God will help you heal. I would love you to share a little bit about what was your thought as a man throughout your life about abortion?
Sure. Well, I grew up Catholic, and as a Catholic, going through Catholic school, Catholic high school, obviously I was taught the teachings of the church. And I remember my theology class with Father Stiegler, and I think he taught me the dignity of the human person and did teach me the reasons behind the sanctity of life and how a person has dignity regardless of where they are, how rich they are, how poor they are, whether born or whether they're old. I understood that logically. And the problem is that I really wasn't grounded in my faith. I wasn't praying to God, and I wasn't receiving the type of grace that I might need, because when abortion comes to you, when the tough call comes to you, you don't know how you're going to respond. So in my case, my ex-girlfriend, she got pregnant when I was 21, and she told me, John, I know you're Catholic. I don't care what you think. I'm going to have an abortion.
How old were you?
I was 21.
Oh, I'm sorry. You said that. Okay.
Yeah, I was 21.
And now you say ex-girlfriend. Was
this
she
was
your
a girl.
girlfriend
This
at
was
the
a
time?
girl. Yeah, we were dating, and this girl that I liked her.
Okay.
What, for me, I just went silent, and I didn't know how to respond. I was, as a Catholic, the other part of me, as a Catholic, we're taught to be merciful, to care for those that are hurting. So on the one hand, I saw my then girlfriend, and she's struggling. So I had a compassion for her. But on the other hand, I had this understanding that this is the wrong thing to do. And I remained silent. I didn't say anything. And the interesting thing about that was 2 weeks or 3 weeks before my girlfriend called me, I had this very strange dream. And this was a dream which is unusual for me because it was in black and white. And some people dream in black and white. I dream in color. But this was a black and white dream. And in the dream, I actually saw a sperm going towards the egg. And the sperm are moving towards the egg. And they come to the egg. And then there's just a blast of light. And just fast forwarding, seeing this beautiful light and the sense of this is a child, right? So right before she told me that she was pregnant, I knew she was pregnant. In some sense, it was kind of like the foreshadowing that St. Joseph had. But unlike St. Joseph, I remained silent. I didn't take action. And I do regret that, obviously. And so maybe 10 years later, as I had already married my wife, and we are considering having our own children, my wife says to me, "Oh, you should get healing." And I said to her, I said, "Well, I went through confession, and I really felt God's mercy. He did forgive me." And she said, "Well, did you seek for forgiveness from your child?" And I was like, "Oh boy." So I really fought that. Obviously that was really scary to me, because it's one thing to turn to God and ask for forgiveness, but it's another thing to turn to your child who you really let down. And so that was a burden for me to make that choice. But I went through a program called Rachel's Vineyard. It's a national program. It's a retreat for men and women who have had abortions. And it's an opportunity for us to heal. And so I had this experience of going through. My greatest fear going into this was that I was going to be around a bunch of weepy women, and it turned out that I was the one that was really kind of emotional. And one of the things about abortion that I think that all of us forget is abortion affects everyone. Of course, it in a very intimate way, it affects the women because the child is in their womb, but it affects the grandmother, the community, as you said. What if it was Jesus? What if it was a saint? What if it was going to be the greatest scientist in the world? So it affects us all in many different ways, and it clearly affected me. And I didn't recognize that moment when I stuffed my feelings down, when I turned away from being what it meant to be a man, which is to protect life, that part of me died. And so in the retreat, you have this opportunity to name your child, and you have an opportunity to write a letter to your child. And so I really wrestled with that because I was really afraid of confronting my child. And I remember coming into the retreat beforehand and having these conversations with God, saying, God, could you please just give me his name? Give me his name. Give me his name. And, I'm not hearing anything. And so at the retreat, you have this opportunity. You're sitting in adoration. And I was in adoration, wrestling with God. God, give me the name. And then all of a sudden, and I am sorry, I'm getting emotional now because I'm remembering that. I remembered, wait, I'm the father. I can name, this is my child. And it was like, something came out of, I was able to see clearly, very transparently that, wait a minute, this wasn't a sin as much as this was a beautiful child. And it was something that was terrible, and yes, it was lost, but this was this beautiful child. And so as I wrote this letter to my son, I began to see the issue of abortion very differently. And actually, it was really in that moment that I really began to get involved in. At the time, I was working at Catholic Charities, and I was involved in lots of different corporal works of mercy, and I continue to be so. But it was then that I realized it's not enough. It's not enough to care for people if at the same time you're not willing to put your own life on the line to protect them. So for me, that was a very poignant moment. So since then, I've continued to be involved in the pro-life movement. And I absolutely agree that this is an emotional issue. And we have to be very sensitive to those that are in pain that have gone through this experience of abortion. But the thing that I would say is that God can turn what is this sort of dark experience of abortion, and he can take even the darkest thing and transform it. And so some of the most powerful pro-life leaders had abortions, and through healing and the recognition that this was a beautiful child, and the recognition of God's mercy, they were catapulted into doing great works. And so I don't know if I'm doing great works, but I'm always, when Christine, actually, I would normally say no, but when the issue of abortion comes up, I made a promise to my son, whom I named Joshua. I said, I kept you a secret and I didn't defend you, but if ever I have a chance to proclaim your name, to say that you were beautiful, that you were good, that I would always take it. And so, I said yes. So I think my wife didn't expect me to say yes, but I said yes because that's how I pay back. That's how I can continue to honor his life as best I can.
So his life, how did you come to the realization that your baby was a boy?
I had this knowing, and I think it came during the dream, and I don't know if it was right, but I had this sense that this was a boy. And so I named him Joshua, which means God saves. And So I believe that God saves all of us, and God saved him, and is, I hope, going to save his mother and me as well.
So, yeah, you brought up mother, and I was going to ask, that was going to be my next question. Did you ever have a conversation with her ever since the abortion? And tell me a little bit about that. Did you go with her? Did you pay for it? Like, what was that whole experience? We've got 5 minutes before the break, so we might have to continue it on the other side, but I got to go there.
Absolutely. Well, I do. I regret this too, but again, as a good Catholic, I did want to not care for someone that was my girlfriend. This was my responsibility too, and so I was torn. I didn't think it was the right thing to do. I didn't have any money. I had to call my mom. It was very humbling, and tell her what happened and ask for money. My mom is not Catholic. I don't think I would have called my dad, who is Catholic, but I called my mom.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
and so she gave me the funds, and I took her to have an abortion, and we never talked about it ever. Mm-hmm. And here's the interesting thing, and this played out for me. This is how we're going to save this relationship, this child. We can't have this. This is going to disrupt things. So that was I was trying to placate. She wanted this. Okay, I'll do this. The interesting thing is usually that is the marker of the end. That is the end because there's this sort of this pain that is there, and you're part of it. And so really that was the moment where we sort of split ways. Like most Catholics, I would say, yeah, I'm pro-life, but I don't want to tell a woman what to do. Well, that's not, again, I understand it. I was there, so I totally understand it. There's sort of this mix of trying to have mercy, but also trying to defend life. And at the end of the day, when you have a beautiful child that really doesn't have anyone to defend them, the mercy compels you to defend that life, even though it may look like to the other person that you're not acting in mercy, you're not caring about the other. I do care about the other, but I'm compelled to protect that child because no one else is going to do it.
God bless you. Thank you again, John. I know that this is not the easiest topic to discuss, live on the radio. No, but I love your honesty. Yeah. And I love your emotions because it is emotional. This is a serious, deep rooted, passionate belief. And I was very deep rooted and passionate about it the other way, right? A woman should choose. And I know Christine was ready to fight the fight for the women's choice until, again, God showed her the way to the sanctity of life. And so I know that there is a little bit of your story. So while you were raised Catholic and you were telling a little bit about the fact that you didn't necessarily have a relationship with Jesus, you were just one of those Catholics that did what the Catholics do and go to Mass and things like that. I know you had a bit of a conversion, and that's in Christine's book, I believe, Full of Grace. And you've got it. I don't.
Full of Grace.
Excellent. So this is a story of a bunch of people in there, and one of them is you. Can you share a little bit about the true moment that you were touched by God, and I would say your reversion, even though you were a practicing Catholic going to Mass, but you truly got touched by Mary and Jesus?
Absolutely. And I would say in my case, the conversion moments, there was different key moments. And I think the first moment for me actually was in high school. And it was the moments related to the fact that it was so hard for me in high school. I had grown up and things kind of were easy for me. I was fairly popular at school and good at sports. And then I went to a really big Catholic high school, and I always did have some learning disabilities. So I was really encouraged by my parents not to do sports and just really focus on academics. And so I ended up really not having any friends, and I was too proud to really share my the fact that I didn't have friends with my family. I was afraid to just say, hey, I don't have any friends. I'm struggling. And so I was really alone. And to the point where in high school, I remember just between lunch was the worst time because I would just have to wander around because I didn't want to sit alone because that just meant I was a loser. I needed to walk around like I had somewhere to go, but I didn't have anywhere to go. And so it was my sophomore year, late in my sophomore year, and I went to church at St. Philip's in Pasadena's beautiful church. And I remember right before the kiss of peace, and I was praying to God. I said, God, give me peace. I need peace, in a very deep way. And at that moment, I remember seeing someone behind me, and he was a homeless person, and it's a packed church, and he was all by himself in a pew, and I was in the pew, and I was sort of felt all alone. Although I was with my family, I was on that sort of the outskirts, and I felt this kind of connection to him, that we were kind of alone together. And so I went to him at the kiss of peace, and I remember him taking my hands and looking at me, and I felt the Spirit descend, and I remember him saying, there's a lot of good people here at this church, but today you've understood the gospel. And in that very moment, everything made sense to me, and I felt this sense that God loved this person, and didn't just love him, that he greatly liked him specifically. And that same moment, as I understood this homeless person that everyone else despised, that God loved him, that God loved me, and he loved me specifically, and I wasn't alone. And so after that, I had this special kind of connection to homeless people, and I used to remember anytime I was lonely, I would kind of go out on the streets and just be with homeless people and just talk with them. And I felt a sense of God's presence and his love. And every time I could see in them that God loved them, and it would come back, and then I would remember, wait, God loves me. And so that was my first sort of experience of God in a personal sense, and that God knew me specifically, and he liked me specifically. And that's never left. I mean, that's been my greatest strength, my greatest hope, is even though I'm not always perfect, I have this sense that God really likes me. And I just have to remember that, and I turn and go to God, I'm sorry, but I trust that he likes me. I trust that he will forgive me. And that's thanks to beautiful. That experience. Yeah,
that's where you see Jesus in everyone, in the homeless.
And I still do. And so that led me to, obviously, eventually, I started out sort of trying to follow in my dad's footsteps in sales, and I was working for big companies and making lots of money, but I wasn't finding happiness. And so I did find my way back to that, and I started volunteering at a homeless shelter in San Francisco. And then they offered me a position, and it was less than 25% of what I was making. I said, I can't do that. And then I remembered, well, wait, this is maybe what I'm called to do. And so I went for it. And it was the greatest decision I ever made in terms of work. And it was just, it was a great joy, that whole period of time when I got to just be with folks on the margin, and recognizing that God has he is specially present with those that sometimes people might think really aren't lovable. And so that was a big part of my conversion, my first part of my conversion. Yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah. That's beautiful. Okay, so Patricia Sandoval is another person, and I just want to, because I picked up this book, and it's another book that Christine wrote of her story, right there.
I did it. I'm not very good at this. Sorry, Christine.
No, that's okay. So it's Transfigured, and it's Patricia Sandoval's story, basically, which is amazing because I picked up that book and I read it from cover to cover in one sitting. It's that great of a read, and it's that wonderful of a story. And I believe she had 3 abortions, and now she is out there as a pro-life speaker, speaking in Spanish and globally all over the place. And she's just a beautiful person that I've never met. We're friends on Facebook. I just sent her a note the other day because she was on, I think it was, oh my gosh, she was Leah Darrow's podcast the other day. And I was like, oh, I'm so proud of you for getting out there. And so you know her personally. Yeah. And, I think when you meet people that have been through such tragedy, I mean, she had drug addictions and just lost. And this isn't and I guess you could say practically homeless, right? At one point in time.
Yeah, she was homeless. I mean, she started out like a regular, normal Latina family, a normal Hispanic family, Catholic. She got good grades and she got involved in some relationships, and she had an abortion. In fact, she had 3 abortions, and she eventually actually worked for Planned Parenthood. And in part of the moment when she went off the wagon was she worked and was asked to work in the back. And in the back is where, like you said, you have to pick up and count body parts. And it was so traumatic for her that she got into drugs and became homeless, but for the grace of God, she would still be homeless or dead at this point.
Right. Yeah. Right. No kidding. It's an amazing story. Yeah. So that was Transfigured. Hold that book up one more time.
Okay. Try to do it a little slower this time.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Transfigured. Perfect. She's just a beautiful person. Okay, so if anyone's joining us, it's Find Something More, Find Your Way Home on Radio Maria. You can stream it on .us. And I just want to ask if you could I'm begging you, I know in the book there's your letter to your son Joshua. And I know it might be emotional, but is there a way that you could maybe read a little bit of it to the audience so that they know the healing that comes from naming your child? And the reason I'm asking this was because I went on a 5-day silent retreat, and it just so happened that they were having mass for people who have lost a child, whether it be through miscarriage or stillbirths or something, and also abortions. And this one woman, bless her heart, came to me and she was talking, and she's like, I was talking to Father, and he said, have you named your child? And she never thought about it, and it was really emotional for her. But it was a beautiful mass, and they all brought up, roses, and they said the name of their child. And there's something so healing about that, where it's a little life, a little baby. And, I just love it if you'd share a little bit, if you're comfortable with it. If not, you could just kind of talk about it.
I can. Well, and you're so right. I mean, I can only speak for myself, but it was literally at the moment when I named my child that the scales came off of my eyes, that I saw the world in a whole different way, and myself as a man that I had when I didn't defend my child. Part of me as a man is to be a father, and as a father to protect, and so I gave part of myself away, and so it sort of came back to me in that moment, and so it was a great healing for me on the one hand. And the other thing was that my fear was that if I confronted or named my child, and that I spoke to my child, that he would then turn on me, because justly, why not? I abandoned him. I didn't defend him. But it was really just the opposite, that was in the naming of the child and then turning to him and seeing him in sort of my heart, was when I saw truly God's mercy and God's love in seeing him. And so, sure, I will read part of my letter to him. I named him Joshua. My dear little Joshua, you are probably wondering where I've been and why I left you behind to die, and why I didn't even bother to think about you these many years. The answer to these questions do not come easy. The truth is that I was a coward for not speaking up for you 12 years ago now, and I have continued to be a coward running away from my sin. It gives me comfort to know that you might be with Jesus right now as I write this letter to you, but it saddens me to know that I will never see you in this lifetime. I know that you would have been a special boy, a beautiful gift from God. I am sorry that I did not see that then. I was afraid of what people might think if they found out that your mom was pregnant, afraid of your mom's anger if I questioned her. I put the guilt of my sin on her, and I was wrong for that. She was young and afraid like me. Like me, she didn't want to believe that she was killing her own son. We were both at fault. I am sorry for my part, and I'm sorry for blaming your mom. I pray that she may also one day see you in heaven. I don't know if there's any gift that I could share with you that could compare with the gift you have received in being with Jesus for all eternity. But I would like to reach out to you, to hug you as my son, to share my heart with you. I would like it if you could give me a second chance to be the father that I wasn't for so many years. I miss seeing you as a baby, seeing your first steps, comforting you in your fears, laughing with you, disciplining you, teaching you, loving you. God willing, I would like to see you. Maybe God could grant me this request before I die, to be able to hold my oldest son in this lifetime would be a great gift. If you would like to see me, ask Jesus. I'm sure he will grant you this request. I know he loves you very much. Please ask him. It would mean a lot to me. I promise I will continue to pray for your mom, and I hope that you will keep me and my wife in your prayers. I know that I wouldn't have had the courage to try to contact you if it wasn't for her. She means the world to me. We are both hoping that we can have children one day, God willing. We would like you to be included in our family. Please think about it and let us know. Love always, your dad, John.
Wow.
Sorry.
How hard was that? How long did it take you to write?
Yeah, I didn't expect, again, to be emotional about it, but yeah, I mean, it's personal.
Right. Very personal.
Yeah.
Do you? So I have to ask: Has he come into your dreams, or have you seen him? Has he showed himself?
I would say this. Let's say for some people, when they're the most desperate, maybe they call St. Anthony, they call Mary, or of course I pray to Mary and Joseph and St. Francis and many other saints. But when I'm desperate and it's related to my family, I ask Joshua to pray for us, and miracles have happened. Anytime that I bring Joshua in, and I don't do it very often, he has helped. And one day, God willing, maybe in my dreams, I will have the gift of being able to hug him and to see him. Maybe not until I die, but I have.
That's
faith.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that, a lot of people who have gone through an abortion, they don't know that the baby is up there in heaven praying for them. They can be an intercessor, just like any saint and Mary and Saint Joseph and all the angels and all the holy men and women up there. I mean, you've got your baby who's got your flesh and blood sitting up there praying for you. And I think there's something magical and beautiful about that. That just, I think, warms the soul in my personal opinion. I think, having not been through this, I can't imagine. And so as we wrap this up, what let's talk about what the world can do to support pro-life and to open people's hearts to this. Like, this is the reality of abortion, your experience, and also what I've experienced, which is other people's experience. I'll be honest with you. When I hear other people's stories, it breaks my heart. And then when I started seeing that is a little baby, like how quickly they turn into little, I mean, from the moment of conception, you have a soul. God gives you a soul. But so let's talk about it. Here we are in the voting aspect, right? You can vote for a pro-life president. But what about the states? What are your thoughts and ideas there?
I mean, I'm in the state of California, so if the Constitution were to allow for states to ban abortions, that would make no difference in California. There was abortions before Roe v. Wade in California, and I promise you there will be afterwards. So we have to in the political sense, really do a lot more than just doing a vote and saying, "Oh, I did my good deed," because really it's so much more than that. I mean, abortion is happening because we, the people, are allowing it to happen, and so it's not going to get saved by one politician. That we have to really convert the hearts and minds of the people, and we need to go move beyond just making abortion illegal, but to make abortion unthinkable. And that's where we go. And then abortion becomes illegal. But first, it has to be unthinkable. We have to move to the point where we begin to see the unborn as children, as people. And then, of course, people of goodwill would say, no, of course not. Of course, my girlfriend was not thinking this is her child. She didn't have a name. She wasn't naming the child. She was trying to believe that this is a fetus. This is not a person. This is just, I'm doing a procedure. Of course, that was a lie. But how do we change that? How do we convert hearts? And, that's not an easy thing, but I will say that it has to go more than just voting. So you talked about one example, you talked about the March for Life. Well, in the West Coast, we have the Walk for Life West Coast. It's not as big as it is in DC, but we have about 50,000 people that go through San Francisco. And I remember the first Walk for Life was the very first one. And there was only maybe about 8,000 of us at that time. And then the counter protest at that one was maybe 2,000 people. But these were very radical, a radical group, and they were spitting on priests, and they were really, it was a really raucous type of group. It was interesting. And I knew when I was going to be doing this walk, because I was working with homeless, I knew I was going to be seeing some of my colleagues on the other side. And so, sure enough, as I make the first turn, I see my good friend who I work with. He's giving everyone the middle salute. He's just really, I mean, not himself, because he's the nicest guy in the world. And I go run over and I give him a hug. And I say, "Oh, Joel, it's so good to see you." And, we talk for a little bit, and then I continue. And then we continued to have conversations after that. And many years after he moved to Philadelphia, and I ran into him. And he made it a point to say, "John, I became a Christian. It's through friendships and through dialogue and through sharing our stories, being willing to be vulnerable and saying, and also to listen, to try to understand. Well, tell me why, you're a good person. Why do you believe this? Now, and let me tell you what I believe, and let me say why, but not to try to immediately say you're wrong and I need to convince you first. It's a conversion. It's not, we can have the best arguments in the world, but we're talking about something spiritual and something emotional, and very good people have, including yourself. You said yourself, you were pro-choice. I don't think you were a bad person at that time. Maybe you think you were, but you believed a lie, and you you really believed it. My wife did. And so we start off assuming that the other person is a good person, and that we are trying to share what we understand to be true, but try to hear what they're saying and where they're coming from and meet them there. So I think conversion is really important. I think helping men and women who have had abortions to get the healing, you need to actually not only just receive the healing from God, but you have to name your child. You have to kind of go into it. And then once you've done that, then you're willing to step forward. It's not such a scary thing. And we need to be willing to take the things in our own family and our community and our church and pull them up, those dark things, to the light of Christ. That's what St. Paul said. He was literally speaking about the sins of the flesh. He said, you need to take these things in our church, put them up to the light of Christ. And what happens if we do that? If we lift this book up into the light, it reflects light. It becomes light. And so you and I can become light for the world. And even our sins can become light. God can transform those things. And our sins can help others to heal, help others to be converted. And so we have to be willing to take risks. If we can't do that, we're not going to be able to convert enough people. And if we don't convert enough people, it's going to be hard to do the politics. I think it's a shortcut just to go straight to the politics. Now, that said, my work, I do a lot of advocacy on behalf of the church, and I do do a lot of work on the state level. And that's another place where people can be. You need to meet with your legislators. You need to encourage those legislators that are quote unquote pro-life, and let them know that, no, this is a priority for you. And for those that it's not a priority, you need to show up and be respectful so that you can represent the pro-life community in a good way and say, I'm a respectful, this is what I believe. I want you to understand why this is important, but not to be belligerent to that person, so that you can represent what it means to be a pro-life. And through conversion, through friendship, hopefully we can, and of course prayer and the grace of God, that we can heal the culture. We have to heal the culture because it's broken.
I think it's through love, and your last commentary is our ending prayer. I will just say it's all about love, everyone. Go love your neighbor and help them heal and bring them to Jesus. And we all hope you find something more and find your way home. God bless you.